India is a country which was the aim of global navigation for almost the entirety of global history.
As part of the Amrit Kal vision, the country is planning an ambitious scaling up of its ports capacity. Capacity of our ports is planned to be scaled to 10,000 million tons per annum by 2047.
The first phase of Vizhinjam Port is finally operational. It is India's first transshipment port constructed and operated by Adani Ports and Special Economic Zone.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is the container transshipment port of Kerala, Vizhinjam.
Vizhinjam Port will emerge as the largest private port in Kerala and will be a huge revenue contributor to the state.
Now this makes me curious. We have hundreds of ports in India, including dozens of major ports. Then how is this port so special? And how is this going to impact India's economy and maritime as a whole? Well, to understand that, first let me give you a structure or mind map you will be following in today's episode. First of all, let's understand what the hell is this transshipment port. Then we can understand what's so special about Vizhinjam to become India's first transshipment port. After that, we can understand how this port will change our current shipping pattern. And finally, how Vizhinjam will be a game-changer asset for Indian maritime sector in three ways: increase share in global trade industry, strategic independence, and boost tourism in India. So let's begin. Let's begin with understanding what is this transshipment port. Well, transshipment ports are nothing but ports where huge mother vessels can dock and smaller feeder vessels can transship the goods to other parts from there. But why? Why can't the mother vessels directly go where it has to go? Why is this transshipment process is done? Well, there are basically two major reasons for that. Firstly, every port doesn't have the capacity to dock these mother vessels, which have a carrying capacity of 2,000 to 24,000 TEUs. TEUs are nothing but containers size 20 feet. That's why the name 20-foot equivalent unit. Secondly, if you see this map, the white dots you see moving are the ship's movement. And you can see through the density of the ship movements that they are forming international trade routes. Mother ships mostly follow these routes. And if a mother ship is passing through an international sea route and a nearby country has a small shipment, it doesn't make sense to dock the entire ship to that country, right? Instead, smaller ships can come from the country and collect from the mother ships docked at the nearest transshipment port in the international route. That's why transshipment is a very integral part of global maritime trade. And until October last year, India did not have any transshipment port. So that made me curious again. India is not a small country. We trade in billions of dollars of goods from many countries. So why didn't we have it before? And what's so special about Vizhinjam to become India's first transshipment port? Well, the answer is very simple here. For the mother vessels to dock, the natural depth of the water should be 15 meters or more. And interestingly, except Vizhinjam, none of the ports in India have this depth naturally. Vizhinjam has a natural depth of 18 to 20 meters, though this depth could even be created artificially through a process called dredging. In the process, the sediments that accumulate near the beaches are removed regularly through dredging machines. But the problem with this process is that it incurs a huge cost to the ports, which they have to recover anyway by increasing the prices of their services. And in the world where the logistics costs are already very competitive, this will put the port out of competition with other ports. On contrary, Vizhinjam has a natural depth of 18 to 20 meters. They do not require dredging, ultimately keeping the cost of the services highly competitive. So okay, that makes sense that why Vizhinjam is the first and the only transshipment port in India right now. But what was still bugging my head was that, how are we trading until now? And how Vizhinjam will change that existing pattern? Let's understand this with an example. Right now, China is the biggest trading partner of India. Let's say TBP is an Indian company who wants to import furniture from China. And let's say the mother vessels carrying the furniture from China is following this east-west international route to reach South China Sea and passing through the Strait of Malacca. Now, since we didn't have any transshipment port before, the ship will either dock in Singapore, Klang Port in Malaysia, or Colombo in Sri Lanka. Then smaller feeder vessels from India will come and transship back to India. And this happens for billions of dollars. Just imagine how severely it impacts the importing cost for the companies like TBP. First, TBP has to pay the importing cost from China to Colombo, then again Colombo to India. This not only increases the logistics cost multifold, but also doubles the time taken because of this excess loading and unloading time. And mind that all these costs are paid in foreign exchanges, causing a huge dent to our forex reserves. But now with Vizhinjam Port in operation, the mother vessels from China or any other country can directly dock at Vizhinjam, reducing the time and cost of maritime logistics of India. Right now, 95% of our foreign goods trade is done through sea routes. Just imagine the impact it will create in the Indian logistics and maritime as a whole. But the interesting part is not limited to this. This is how Vizhinjam will impact our existing pattern of trade. But apart from this, Vizhinjam will be a game-changer asset for Indian maritime in 3 more ways. Let's start with increased share in global trade market. As we saw, the ships sail through the shortest distance, forming these international routes. And the matter of fact is that the international route passing through Vizhinjam Port is the busiest and the most significant routes among all. 2/3 of China's trade and 1/3 of global trade passes through the Strait of Malacca, accounting to around $3.5 trillion of trade value, approximately equal to India's GDP. And as we discussed before, ships passing through these international routes continuously require transshipment ports to deliver goods to different countries. And right now, Singapore, Klang Port in Malaysia, Colombo Port in Sri Lanka, and Jebel Ali in Dubai dominates this region. With Vizhinjam Port in operation, which is just 10 nautical miles away from this route, will become a top destination for transshipment. So since this route is busiest among all, and only 4 to 5 ports are earning all the profits, Vizhinjam can take a big bite of all those profits.
What is the actual cost saving for at least the EXIM clients, 6 to 7,000 crores, and potential revenue of 70 to 75,000 crores if India becomes a large shipping hub?
But what was still bothering my pessimistic Indian mind was that, are Indian ports as competitive as Singapore or Malaysian ports? Because this will ultimately decide whether the shipping companies of the world will dock their ships at Vizhinjam Port or choose other nearest ports. Well, to answer that question, every year, World Bank releases Logistics Performance Index or LPI, ranking every other country based on multiple factors of logistics performance. And interestingly, in the latest release of 2023, India is ranked above Singapore, Malaysia, and Sri Lanka in terms of mean and median turnaround time at ports. Turnaround time simply means the time taken to load and unload a vessel. And right now, India takes on an average of 0.9 to 1 day for loading unloading a vessel, compared to 1 to 1.2 days by Malaysia, similarly by Singapore, and 1 to 1.3 days by Sri Lanka. So with more and more private companies operating the Indian ports now, Indian ports are becoming highly competitive in terms of performance.
As of now, we are working in coordination with all the state governments to improve the infrastructure. लोग जो कहते हैं ना कि भाई इंडिया के ports world class नहीं हैं, so the main objective is to improve the quality of infrastructure, improve the turnaround time, and make all our ports world class ports.
So Vizhinjam Port will not only grab a good bite in the global maritime trade, but also foster multiple businesses in and around Kerala. Which brings us to the next benefit, that is strategic independence. According to the diplomat, currently nearly 75% of India's transshipped cargoes is handled at foreign ports. Like Colombo, Singapore, and Klang ports handle over 85% of India's cargo. Colombo port alone handles 45% of India's transshipped consignments. That being said, China has a very strong influence on the Sri Lankan port infrastructure. According to the diplomat again, China is strengthening its grip on Colombo port after securing an agreement to build, operate, and transfer a warehousing hub within the port. The China Mercantile Port Holdings Company (CMPH) will have a 85% stake in the warehouse facility and will operate it for 50 years. The CMPH already has a 85% stake in the Colombo International Container Terminal (CICT). This means we are too much dependent on Sri Lanka for our trade, and China has a strong hold on the Sri Lankan ports. This ultimately means China has a very strong hold in our supply chain too. This was a huge strategic loss to our country. But now Vizhinjam being in action, India could be self-reliant on its supply chain. So Vizhinjam Port will not only be a game changer economically, but also strategically to India. Which brings us to the last but not the least benefit, Vizhinjam Port will boost tourism in India. There are a number of cruise ships originating and passing through Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. And all of them need ports as big as transshipment ports to dock throughout their journey. With Vizhinjam Port in operation, it's much easier for the Indian tourists to cruise around the world and the world tourists to dock at Vizhinjam during their journey. This will boost Indian tourism at multi-levels. So if I conclude, Vizhinjam Port might be the first transshipment port in India, but not the last. According to the business line, India's shipping ministry plans to start construction of the first phase of the International Transshipment Port at Galathea Bay in the Great Nicobar Islands of Bay of Bengal next year.
That the biggest initiative India has taken is to develop a massive port on the main transshipping line in the Great Nicobar Island in the Andamans.
India is turning its strategically located island chain of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands into a major shipping hub of the Indo-Pacific. The proposed mega terminal at Galathea Bay in the Bay of Bengal has a natural depth of over 20 meters, more than that of Singapore and Colombo.
So my pals and brothers, transshipment is a very integral part of the global maritime trade. And luckily, we are located strategically at the junction of the busiest international route. Vizhinjam Port is just the beginning of a new era of Indian maritime sector. The success of this port will leverage the success of future transshipment ports like Galathea Bay in the Great Nicobar Islands. Let me know in the comment section what's your take on this, and meanwhile, I'll link down all the resources I used to make this video. And if you found anything useful, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and see you again.